In this lesson, we'll learn how to work with symbols and type in perspective. Alright, so in the last lesson we began adding some additional details to our skyscraper here. We added in this top portion right here, and we've also built in these platforms that extend out of the sides of the base of our building. So I went ahead and did this one in the previous lesson. In between lessons I went ahead and did this one right here, and you can see we did that in a very similar fashion to the original platform right here. So there's a couple other details I want to go ahead and add, and maybe one of those details is going to be a helipad we're going to put right here. So let's go ahead and grab our ellipse tool first, and make sure we have our horizontal grid plane selected. And I'm going to come in here and let's just go ahead and draw in an ellipse right here. I'm going to go ahead and hold down Alt and Shift to draw that ellipse from the center. And that looks about centered right there on our plane. And I'll tell you what, let's go ahead and make some changes to this. Let's come over to our appearance panel and let's give it no fill color. And let's go ahead and give it maybe a black stroke for right now. Just like so. Alright, so let's say that we want to go ahead and put a letter H here inside this circle like you'd seen on many helipads. So, type in perspective is going to work just a little different. We talked about two basic workflows, being that we can create objects directly in perspective, or we can bring flat objects into perspective. Well, type works a little differently. We're not going to be able to draw our type right into our perspective planes. We're actually going to have to create that flat. So, I tell you what, let's go ahead and grab our type tool here. And I'm going to come down here below, and let's just draw in a text box. And let's go ahead and give it a capital H. And maybe we make that a little bit larger here. That looks pretty good for right now. So we've gone ahead and created our text frame, and we're ready to go ahead and bring that into perspective. So let me switch over to our perspective selection tool, and I want to go ahead and just drag that into the center of our ellipse here. Alright, so we've got our H positioned, but let's say that we actually want to make some changes to this letter. It appears to be no longer a text frame. Well, there's a couple of different ways that we can modify text after we've brought them onto a perspective plane. One of those ways would be to simply just double-click on the text object here, or we could come up here to Object, choose Perspective, and Edit Text. And yet another option would be to look up here in your control panel. You see here we have a perspective object selected, and this first button right here is going to be to edit the text. So I'm going to go ahead and click that, and you'll see that we enter into what looks like isolation mode for our text object. And you can see here it's for the perspective text, and now we can go ahead and make changes to our text. Let's say we wanted to go ahead and make that a little bit larger, and you can see it's giving us a preview of what we're doing. Let's make that let's go about 40 here. And let's go ahead and change this. Instead of regular Myriad Pro, let's go ahead and set that to bold. And maybe we could even make that a little larger even yet. So I'm going to go ahead and switch back to my perspective selection tool here. And you can see that we have that deselected. Now we can go ahead and back out of isolation mode just simply by using the arrow here. So we're ready to go ahead and reposition this. So let's go ahead and just drag this in here using our perspective selection tool, and we'll just center that up inside our ellipse. Alright, great. So, that's text in perspective. Now let's talk about symbols in perspective for just a moment. You all are familiar with your symbols panel here. We'll go to Window and Symbols. And let's talk about the different kinds of symbols that will work in perspective. Now, symbols will work pretty much as you would expect they would work here in a perspective plane, but there's a few restrictions. There's certain types of images that won't work on a perspective plane. For example, raster images, when they're part of a symbol, we can't put them onto a perspective plane. Non-native files, symbols that contain envelopes, legacy type, or gradient meshes. So none of those type of symbols will actually work on a perspective plane. And there are some very minor functionality differences with symbols, none of them which I'm going to go ahead and demonstrate for you here, but basically when it comes to like replacing a symbol or breaking a link when you expand a symbol, or resetting a transformation. So just be aware that not all the functionality of a symbol may work on your perspective plane. So I'm going to continue to come in here and add a couple of other details to our building here before we begin adding some color. So I'm going to come back over here to my orthographic drawing, and let's go ahead and grab the base shape here that I had on our top-down view. And I'm going to go ahead and drag this into perspective on that horizontal plane. Now you can see here that it's not exactly right, so I'm going to go ahead and just make a copy of this first, and then we're going to go ahead and rotate that so we can bring it in and sit it right evenly on the base of this building. Alright, so for this next step, I'm going to go ahead and make a new layer. We haven't been making any new layers up until this point, but let me come over to my Layers panel, and let me just go ahead and make one new layer here, and I'm going to move this artwork down to this layer 3. So we're going to have this underneath all the artwork we've been creating here. That way we can come in here, and I believe all of our artwork's on layer 1. We'll just hide that. Alright, so let's go ahead and drag the shape into where the base of our building is. And we can always use our transform panel to set the corner of that to the origin. We'll just set that now to 0, 0. Alright, so we've got that set. So let's say we want to make some parking lots or some different details, maybe a grass plane that sort of surrounds our building. Now, obviously you could go and take this, this perspective drawing as far as you want to. We're not going to go that far when it comes to detailing the area around our building, but I'm going to go ahead and make here sort of a parking lot structure. Let's go ahead and just hold down our Alt key, and I'm going to use the transform control here on the side of our bounding box. So we're growing it out in equal proportions on each side. Alright, so let me go ahead and just copy this, and I'm going to paste it in front with a Control F. And let's go ahead and retract that, because I want to bring it out the front side here as well. So let me go ahead and zoom in for this. I want this to come out kind of with the width of this center portion right here. And I'm just going to drag this side just like so. This is going to be sort of like the drive up and the approach for the building. So we'll just continue to drag that just a little bit here. Now I'm going to continue copying and using these initial shapes that we've already created, because I know they're centered on our building, because we did that when we set that first shape to the origin. So I'm going to come in and hold down Shift and drag another copy of this. And let's go ahead and resize this one some. Maybe this is going to represent a road that leads up to the building here. Sort of like that. Then we can come and drag that on out. I may go ahead and reposition our artboard so we get all of this vector artwork on top of it here between lessons. But we'll just use the artboard tool for that. So we've got a couple of sort of landscape type objects mapped out here. Maybe we want to go ahead and drag in another one here. Let's just drag a copy of that shape out behind. Just like so. And then maybe there's something we can do with some of these shapes we already have in our building. So I tell you what, let's come over here to the layer we have all of our artwork on. Let's go ahead and select some of these objects, and let's hide these for just a moment. I'm going to go ahead and hide this shape right here and this shape. These as well. And let's go ahead and grab these two shapes right here. I'm going to go ahead and move those down to the layer that I have my parking lot kind of mapped out on here. I'm going to go ahead and just grab that little blue dot and move that on down. And I tell you what, let's go ahead and use our eyedropper tools and sample maybe this color right here. So those blend in nicely. Now we could add even a stroke to this. We'll come up to our color panel and just drag that fill color on top of the stroke color to add a stroke. And let's go ahead and play with the stroke just a little bit. Let's go ahead and increase that. Actually, we'll go ahead and align this to the outside of these shapes here using this third button right here. We'll go ahead and click that, and let's increase the size of this. And we can zoom out a little bit just to get a little better look. Let's go ahead and bring back our hidden objects. And I think that looks pretty good. That looks sort of like there's these little drives that map around to these side parking lots here. I may come back in and grab this object here and move it back just a little bit. Alright, so I think that's as far as I'm going to go with the details for this. I do want to move on in the next lesson and pick up and begin adding some color to this illustration or this building just to make it feel a little more complete. So in the next lesson, we'll continue where we're leaving off here, and we'll begin adding some color to this skyscraper.